Well, hey everyone, we're back. This time we're doing something a little bit different for this particular discussion of a movie that just came out in a spoiler scenario. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, someone who I've been associating with on social media and YouTube for a little while now, Nathaniel Ahart. Would you like to say hello?
Yeah, how you doing, guys? Thanks for tuning in today on Kircher Talks Entertainment. Zach, I'm so honored to be here talking with you about this awesome movie. I'll say right off the bat, and I'm really glad we could make this work out.
I'm really glad too, especially since well, for to provide a little bit of history for anyone who's listening in. Nathaniel and I, we kind of have like I guess you could say an unconventional history to how like we've come to associate with one another in this kind of setting. We're both users of the Letterboxd, and so that's
Yes,
kind of how
sir.
we. Yep, it's a great place for film lovers, and that's kind of how we got connected. As you know, I think I posted a review of what was it, Saturday's Warrior? You said the
Something like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Really terrible Mormon movie. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, such a crummy piece of work that was. Um, but yeah, like I posted it. He saw my review and he really liked it. And then off and on here and there, we kind of like saw each other's reviews, and we've been following each other since. And Nathaniel actually has his own YouTube channel that just
Yeah.
goes by his first and last name. And if you ever want to check that out, he has some great content in there where he talks about film. He loves talking about music as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the series you've been running about, or the series you just started about the albums?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking about that, man. Yeah. So right now, me and the channel Johnny Radio, which is another great channel, you music lovers got to check out. We took a community poll, including our own list as well, of the top 100 albums of the 21st century. We're about 2 episodes in at this point. And we're going to go all the way, counting down from 100 all the way to number one. It's going to be a great countdown, a lot of great records to talk about. Some we might not be as huge on, but if you want to check it out, be our guest. We'd love more viewership and more people coming into our fold. And so if that's something that interests you, yeah, you can just follow me at Nathaniel Ahart. I'm sure Zach will drop a link in the description below, and you can go from there.
I'll absolutely make sure to include that in the description. And other stuff that he's recently done, he's been doing reviews of recently released movies, including the one that we're just about to talk about. He also finished a similar series, like a top 100 countdown for the greatest films of all time. I mentioned that specifically because I got invited on one of the episodes where we counted down numbers 60 through 51.
Man,
But
that was an
in
episode, huh?
that was fun, dude. Every single movie was a straight up banger that we discussed. And I'm like, yes, another great one. But in particular, another thing I wanted to point out was something that I thought was awesome in the countdown for number 20 through 11. One of the films that was included on there is It's a Wonderful Life. You had mentioned it's your favorite film of all time.
Yes, it
And
is.
I'm not sure if you know this, but it's actually mine too.
I kind of figured. I knew it was that or Star Wars. I knew it was like one of those two. So that's awesome, man. It was, see, we can relate on so much here. It's
Yeah,
great.
exactly. And so when I heard this, I'm like, my man's got taste. He knows what's good.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
So yeah, I just want to make sure that you were aware of the fact that like, listening to this, I'm like, yes, my favorite film. It's his too. Um, but yeah, if we can get straight into it then. We also saw a film that both of us loved, and I think the majority of people who have seen it also feel the same. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is a sequel to the also very beloved 2018, excuse me, 2018 film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which that year won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, which is a pretty significant feat considering that I think every other film, except actually no, it's one of two films in the 2010s that wasn't a Disney. In 2011 it was Rango, another personal favorite of mine, and then of course Into the Spider Verse in 2018. And it had some pretty stiff competition that year for other animated films that came out, animated superhero films for that matter. And so, yeah, it's definitely a film that that changed the landscape for computer animated films as we know it. You know, a lot of the films that are getting a lot of acclaim nowadays are kind of taking off of it and taking inspiration from what Into the Spider-Verse did and being a lot more stylish and unique with its approach to combining 2D animation and 3D. Some examples would probably be like, you know, The Mitchells versus the Machines, which is also made by Sony. We just had Puss in Boots: The Last Wish back in December, which I don't think is an amazing movie as some people think, but it definitely was great in the animation department.
And I think it's really good, but it wasn't like, I didn't think it was the best movie from that year at all.
No, not even the best animated movie in my opinion, but
Sure.
I'll talk about that in my top 10 video whenever that comes out. Do we want to kind of share some general thoughts we have about Into the Spider-Verse before going into the sequel?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good place to start. I mean, interestingly enough, I mean, this wait has been so long from this movie because I remember when I saw it, one of the people who went to see the movie with us isn't even here anymore. So 5 years, you know, a lot can happen. But obviously, I was very much anticipating this. The first time I saw it, though, I really liked it. I thought, oh, okay, this is a really good Spider-Man movie. But it wasn't particularly my favorite because I just didn't feel that emotional impact like I do watching Spider-Man 2, for instance. And then I watched it again in theaters like a few weeks after. I was like, okay, this is great. I do love this. But at the time, I actually liked Incredibles 2 that you were alluding to more than this. But looking back, it was like obvious that it deserved to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. And then, not to spoil the list, because if you guys are interested, I'd love to, you know, leave the rest of the surprise to you. But it actually made the Nathaniel Ahart and Company's top 100 greatest films of all time, which I didn't necessarily agree with. Yeah, and it was like one of those things, though. I watched it again for that series, and I loved it even more. It's just a fantastic movie. I just think there's a few things here and there that hold it back from being like a truly, you know, like a masterpiece to me. Kind of like a couple of moments where the humor's a bit forced and awkward, like the hand touching shoulder scene. It just feels a little awkward.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like all, like, you know, some of the soundtrack choices, but also I think that I didn't feel like there's certainly a lot of emotional weight to the story, and I feel that every time I go back and revisit it. But it doesn't grab me in a way, because one thing with that movie, I was like, I felt like his mother was a bit of an afterthought, which I was like, they better get into this in a sequel, and boy, do they. So, but no, I love this movie. It's not even my favorite Spider-Man movie. I actually do like No Way Home better from an emotional standpoint, though I admit from an objective standpoint that Into the Spider-Verse is better in every single way, but I don't enjoy that Spider-Man story better than that. This one, on the other hand, we'll get into, but I'll leave it to you, Zach, to say your thoughts before we get into this review of the Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I guess you could say I sort of went through a similar thing the first film, where, like, you know, seeing it for I was definitely like, yeah, this is awesome. And it made my top 10 for that year when I compiled it. Looking back on it now, you know, after having seen it multiple times and being able to appreciate its graces even more, just like you, Nathaniel, if I was to redo that list, which I do plan to at some point, it would probably be like number 2 or 3 from that year. Probably only topped by like Mission Impossible Fallout and First Reformed. Truly amazing film. And I think it really is just so tightly constructed from a story standpoint, and it knows exactly what it's doing in terms of its themes and the way it's conveyed through the visuals and the storytelling. Now, as we move into Across the Spider-Verse, I'm getting the sense that, you know, perhaps you probably overall like this movie more than Into the Spider-Verse, perhaps?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I've seen this movie a couple times. I did my review on my channel if you guys want to see that as well, but this might be basically tied for the greatest Spider-Man movie of all time, if you ask me. I absolutely loved this film. like I was saying with the first one, I felt like it was missing a little bit of emotional attachment for me, and this movie gives it to you tenfold. And I know some people say, oh, well, maybe it's a little generic, but I don't really see it as that. I could see where maybe that criticism would come from, but the drama's executed so well on top of the animation, which I don't even know how it is more groundbreaking than the original, because that was one of the main selling points of that movie, like you were saying, and we've already seen the impact, even with the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies replicating the same style. But I was just blown away from every single aspect, the way that they play with the characters within the frame. Like, it really is a comic book movie come to life, probably more so than any other film I've ever seen. It isn't a comic book adaptation, it's a comic book movie. And I just think the artistry is just absolutely mind-blowing, especially like in the different worlds where they show the different art styles. Like, in the Gwen Stacy world, you get those like dripping watercolors that are just so beautiful and highlight the emotions of each scene so well. It's just absolutely amazing, the minute details that these animators put into this. Like, every single frame, so much is going on. And yet, despite all this chaos, there's this underlying cohesion to it all that doesn't feel jarring whatsoever. It just works.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane what they accomplished with this. I think you were talking a little bit earlier. I don't remember if it was in this recording or not. About how you were waiting so long for this and it got delayed. And after seeing just the absolute manic variety and how much you see on the screen, it's very evident that they were trying to delay this so that it can not only be such a resplendent tapestry of a bunch of different art styles all at once in the same frame, but so that it could look polished as it does. You have the film, of course, running at your standard 24 frames per second, but you have all these different characters that are moving and interacting at different frame rates, sometimes even in the same frame, like in the same image, which is nuts. I mean, if we want to talk about it, a great example of that, we have Hobie Brown, or Spider-Punk, which is like the London-based. So good, and Daniel Kaluuya is him. Just he gets to actually sound British in this movie, which is great.
It's like one of the only times that's ever happened, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's always playing like Americans, but no, he's a full-blooded guy this time. Where he's kind of like, the punk rocker, like fight the establishment type of Spider-Man. But you look at him and you have his basic character model, but every single time he moves, like there's a different background image surrounding him, as though he can literally only move in the world as if like a magazine cutout is surrounding him, or a newspaper clipping, or you get the idea. It happens in every single. And there's like a different version of that as he's like walking around and swinging. Talk about all the other different kinds of spy people that we see in the movie. Like, at one point there's kind of like an Arthur Morgan, like Red Dead Redemption kind of like cowboy and horse spider person. Of course there's the T-Rex that got teased in the trailers. Of course we have like the main ones that were introduced, like Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman. We have I forget how to pronounce his name, but we have like the Mumbai Spider-Man.
Yeah. I forgot how to pronounce it as well.
You're good, and I don't want to try to butcher it. And of course you have Miguel O'Hara, which he has his own unique look, and that costume looks sweet. And by the way, this is a spoiler discussion, so we can say these things. Of course, you get the few instances of live action spider people in there. We have confirmation that MCU Prowler exists, played by Childish Gambino.
Donald Glover, baby.
Yep, exactly. And then at some points you do see like background images of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Men in their own universes. I gotta admit, I'm not as much on No Way Home as you are, Nathaniel, but teach their own. But I think in comparison to that movie, I think there was a much more effective use of all the different spider people for the purpose, not just of fan service, even though it's definitely there. It's used for the purpose of telling this story that is equal parts like this metatextual explosion of like exploring the ideas behind Spider-Man and what makes him Spider-Man, like or woman, I guess, what makes you a spider person, in the sense what you've experienced and the trauma you've gone through. And then just, yeah, they use that to great effect to really explore that idea, which I think made for a really unique spin on the Spider-Man story. And that it's not just about, Peter Parker or Miles Morales or Gwen Stacy going through their trials and trying to balance their everyday life with fighting a supervillain. No, a lot of this conflict is really just about like who you are, what is your identity, and can you really claim legitimacy over your title as a spider person because of everything you're experiencing. Honestly, I don't really understand how anyone could call this movie generic from that sense, not just because like this is a very stylized movie for one thing, but thinking about it now, that's just such a cool idea for a story. Like, you take real world like meta commentary from actual comic books that exist, it gets incorporated into the story, and they use that as a way to kind of explore like who is this character,
Yeah, no, and I absolutely love like what you said. It really is just an explosion of like everything happened at once, and isn't it? I don't know if it is it sad that like seeing Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire is just like not even like surprising at this point. Like it's still awesome, right? But it's like okay, I kind of expected this. But it's still like awesome how they incorporate kind of like that whole idea of canon events as they're called, and how each Spider-Man story has like a specific turning point that is integral to who each spider person is. I really think it's a great idea and really grounds the story in a way, because I don't know how you feel about this, Zach, but some people that I know as well have been saying that, oh, the multiverse, it has no stakes anymore because there's, different universes, you can bring someone back or whatever. I just don't think that's true at all, because I think it's about the characters in the story. Like as long as you care about them and what's going on in their lives, I think that's really all that matters. I mean, granted, if Marvel keeps bringing back characters from the dead or something, like, yeah, I'll take issue with it. But I don't think it really necessarily affects the stakes, at least in this story specifically, in the way they structured it. Because I think at this rate, and I think you could probably agree with me, this is going to be the first uniformly great Spider-Man trilogy from top to bottom. I don't see the third one being anything less than stellar. I just don't.
No, for sure. And I really get that sense too, that they are leading up to something that is just going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Like I have no idea where it's going, not just in terms of its story, but how are they going to top this like stylistically? It's just, we already said that about Into the Spider-Verse. They proved us wrong with this one. And I'm really looking forward to see how they prove us wrong with Beyond the Spider-Verse next year.
Mm-hmm.
How they're going to pull that off, releasing this in less than a year, I don't know.
I think I'll chime in because I'm wondering if it's just going to be on par with this one. Because since I'm assuming I'm not saying that this is fact. Please nobody take this at my word, but I'm thinking that maybe since it's like back to back, I think the third one's already done. And so I'm assuming it's around the same level of animation that they put in, which is still a lot, which is still amazing. And I will take that. I will not complain if that is what they give us. But, then again, they had 5 years to really improve upon the first one. So if I were to guess, I think it's going to be on the same level as the second, animation wise.
Yeah, and if it is, like, that's totally fine with me, because I think just in terms of what they accomplished here, it's great. I don't think they necessarily have to top themselves again, but I mean, if they do, amazing. But yeah, like if they can at least, make it on this level, that's still an accomplishment that is worthy of an Academy Award for sure.
Yeah, and I think, hey, I mean, we haven't seen Miyazaki's film, and he's honestly just going to airdrop it or something. I don't know. But
not releasing any trailers or anything. It's crazy.
Is wild to me, but hey, I respect it. If anyone's going to do it, it's him. But I don't know. I have a good feeling that this is probably the front runner to win Best Animated Feature. And I don't know what you think about this, Zach, but a lot of people are saying it might get into the Best Picture. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's likely?
People might be more inclined to think that now, especially after how, I guess you could say, populist the Best Picture nominees for the 2022 Academy Awards were. I mean, we had Top Gun, we had Avatar. Wasn't there like a couple other blockbusters in there? Like,
yeah, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, Top Gun, Avatar. I mean, I guess you could say Everything Everywhere All at Once was a blockbuster, though it was a A24 movie. But, you know, it kind of falls in the same category.
Yeah, for sure.
And Elvis.
Yeah, I guess you could call Elvis that too, for sure. It feels more Oscar baity, but
yeah, not that it's good, but it does fall in that category. That's a story for another day. Yeah.
I did want to comment on that point you made, though, about the stake in this story, because I'm actually of the opinion that a superhero story can work best if they make it a personal one, like, you know, where the stakes really are just legitimately personal.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that as I saw Across the Spider-Verse and was thinking about it later. Like, in the grand scheme of things, there's not like some big universe-ending event that's taking place. I mean, you have the whole thing with the Spot, but like, even taking that away, this whole movie is just about, you know, Miles trying to figure out like his life, and he's trying to basically deny that his history or that his story is going to be written by these quote-unquote canon events, like potentially his dad dying in the line of duty or something. It kind of goes back to you mentioned it earlier, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is actually my favorite film of 2022. And the thing that I really like about that film is, despite the fact that it is this big multiverse jumping adventure, the fact that it is like very nihilistic is point. You've seen the movie, so you know. The whole movie is about, you know, them realizing that nothing matters, but at the same time, everything does. You still want to live life to the fullest, and you still want to be happy, despite, you know, maybe not thinking that what you're doing really matters in the grand scheme of things. And I like the fact that that was a multiverse story that really allowed itself to be that grounded and emotionally resonant. And in a similar way, I appreciate that about Across the Spider-Verse, that while it does feel very big, at the same time, it's not big in the sense that it's, oh, you know, if the characters don't accomplish this, then everything in the universe is going to implode on itself. You know, it's just about this conflict of ideals, and the multiverse is a window into that, you know, with Miles encountering literally every other spider person who's accepted their reality.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, I actually do want to comment on Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that made my top 10 of 2022. I think that comes as no surprise. But I think it's like ever so slightly overrated, in the sense that I think the way they deal, it's just the thing for me, because everything you say about the emotional stuff, I think that's why that movie really works. It moves me to tears every time I see it. But I think some of the, you know, multi-dimensional travel that they do, and like the things, it's funny, like the things that they do, that, oh, we have to do all these random things, but I think it's just random for the sake of being random a lot of times. And I feel like sometimes I'm not sure where they are, like what universe they're in. And I assume that's at least for some kind of, what's the word, for more thematic purposes. But I don't know, like, I like this movie. Like, here's the thing, Everything Everywhere All at Once was my number 4 of last year, so it was one of my favorite movies from last year. I like this movie even more, which says a lot, because, you know, that's why I'm saying I don't see this not making my top 10. But I think the way they deal with the multiverse in this is so well thought out in every single facet. Like, you really understand the line of thought going through these universes and how they interact with one another. I think it's just written in such a way that's so well defined, as is all these characters, because, like I said, one of my problems with the first Spider-Verse, which I don't like more than Everything Ever All at Once, keep in mind, but the thing is that emotional attachment in some of the characters feeling like they weren't as fleshed out. Well, here you get to see a lot more of Rio Morales, and you get to see a lot of it. And she is just so wonderful of a character. Like, for someone who's just kind of in the background in the first one, they did everything I wanted them to do with her in this film. Especially, obviously, it's very similar to Spider-Man 2 in the sense where, like you said, like I think the best Spider-Man stories are really about our hero trying to figure out how to balance their life with all the stuff that they're doing to help the community and being Spider-Man. And you get that here, the conflict between him and his parents, which, you know, that amazing argument scene on the rooftop always stands out to me as well. But it never feels like, you know, fake to me. Like, because you could have those movies where like a parent has an argument with their kids and they're mad at each other for a long time, but then you get that scene like right after where Gwen comes back and they're like flirting with each other and they're hanging out, and you know his mom comes up and is like being kind of awkward about it. Same thing with dad, but you have that scene with her and Miles after where she's saying to him, you know, like I was raising this little boy, and now he's not that little boy anymore, and I just want him to know like that he can go into any room and not like kind of like be passed over. I don't know if you know the specific line that she says, but like basically you can stand up to them and say you're not going to take this. Like, that scene is probably my favorite in the entire movie because it's intimate moments like that that make the story so inherently personal. And that scene moves me to tears every time I watch it, because I'm just like, this is just the writing is so nuanced in a way that, you know, you could feel like you were having this conversation with your own parent, sort of thing. And I just absolutely love the character development in this movie in a way that I think exceeds the original in every single way.
Yes, for sure. This definitely is an improvement over the original, and being able to balance a lot of its characters more. Yeah, especially I agree with everything you said about the relationship between Rio and Miles in particular. Like, that was really emotionally touching and affecting, just being able to watch them interact in that sense. Um, and we touched on Gwen too. Like, she almost as much of the main character in the story as Miles is.
Yeah. No, I think the stuff with her father is incredible. I've never seen anything like that in a Spider-Man movie before, because, right, you look at the Tobey Maguire movies and it's kind of hinted that Aunt May always knows that he's like, she has a sneaking suspicion that he's Spider-Man, like especially the talk she gives to him at the end of Spider-Man 2. But like in this one, you finally get these two opposing forces who are somehow within the same family, and there's kind of like that dramatic irony there, you know, with one character knowing something that the other doesn't. And when Gwen reveals to her father that she is Spider-Woman, and yet again, that's why I love the watercolors are just like dripping down the scene as he just kind of like painted in the shadow in the background. It's just so beautiful, and it just the decision for him to still like pursue her is so heartbreaking. Like, I've never seen anything that heartbreaking. And on top of the stuff with Peter dying and her dealing with the tragedy of that, and no one's really there to support her for that. So you understand why Gwen makes the decisions that she does throughout this entire narrative, because her whole world is basically fallen apart. And I love how in the end it kind of comes back around that he quit the police force, which not only is a great moment emotionally, but also calls into question everything that Miguel was saying about canon events. Because
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, you can speak more on that if you want to. I'll stop for a minute.
Oh no, you're fine. No worries. But I think I know what you're getting at. You know, the whole idea about, like, you know, each Spider-Man has their own canon event where, like, a police captain is killed and trying to save someone, and so this whole entire time, Gwen is thinking that is going to happen to my dad at some point.
Yeah.
But then there's that whole twist where, like you said, her father, Captain Stacy, and then she's like, "Wait, what now?" well, what's going to happen with my canon event now and whatnot? So I did think that was kind of an interesting twist on that.
Yeah,
Sure.
because it makes you wonder, is everything he's saying actually like legitimate? Does he actually know what he's saying? Because when he presents this argument, the thing that's so brilliant about it, like you can't really disagree with either Miguel or Miles and what they're saying, because in Miguel's situation, as tragic as it is, trying to step into the shoes of another Miguel O'Hara and raise his family, only to have them be ripped apart because of his own doing, is really, really compelling, even though it's like brief when they show it. But you can understand why Miles is like, I'm not just going to let you keep me here while my dad gets killed. Like it's such, that's the thing I love about this. It has a complicated decision. I think this is what all the best Spider-Man movies have, like Spider-Man 2, like No Way Home. They have complicated decisions and conflicts that our hero has to wrestle with. And really like make the decision, what am I going to do about this, and what is the right way to approach this, and having that opposition there really helps you relate to Miles, but also makes you understand Miguel, and I think that kind of writing is really just beyond impressive. I just think that's the essence of screenwriting 101 more than anything.
Yeah, and it's great. I would assume then that you're of the opinion that how do I say this? Would you be someone that said Miguel O'Hara did nothing wrong?
I don't know about that. We have to wait and see, but like they make it in a way that you can understand where he's coming.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this narrative is so compelling in so many ways, on top of so many other things too. Like I just think this is funnier than the first, and every single, I think almost every single joke hits and lands. And also, I just love the fact that they recruited a 14-year-old kid to make the Lego sequence, because that was like, when that scene happened, that is like one of my favorite moments. And like when he goes in the bathroom, goes beep boop, like he's calling Miguel. Oh my goodness, just stuff like that is so amazing. But like that's the thing, there's so many details in this movie that add so much to the world that they did not have to throw in there. There's a billboard that says, literally on it says soda, the generic brand. And I didn't notice that until the second time I saw it, and I was just dying, because I was like, the fact that they went out of their way to animate a billboard for generic soda is just shows you the level of meta commentary that this movie's at, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pay close attention to that now when I see it again.
It's a very subtle scene.
Me.
Yeah, because it's just Miles swinging at night. I think it's right before he goes to the collider, or well, not the collider, but when they follow Spot back into the multiverse, but also multiverse. Excuse me, I said unintelligible nonsense there. But I also love the stuff with him and Gwen, like especially that scene where they're like hanging off of, I forgot what building they're on, but just them talking to each other about like why it's never worked out for like Gwen Stacy and Spider-Man, and you have a feeling it's like she really wants to get with this kid, but there's just these things that are going on in their own universe and their own lives that prevent that, and it feels like almost like a dangerous situation, and just the way they mirror like too, like that when they're telling Gwen you can never come back, she's like, oh, I'll never see him again. And you get that amazing shot that mirrors from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, where he's hanging upside down and she's standing right in front of him. Looks like they're about to kiss, but it's so perfectly captures the longing and in the distance between these two characters who really have this beautiful, intimate connection with each other. And it's really stuff like that I don't think is in the first movie that really puts this movie over for me. And the fact, I think you can agree to this, Spot is like played by Jason Schwartzman brilliantly as always. Is such a great villain, because it, from the trailer looks like he's just the joke, and the movie kind of portrays him as a joke in the beginning of the film, but then it turns him into a legitimate threat in a way that really feels, like it really, there's a lot at stake with his character and the way he's able to kind of tear the whole multiverse apart from the inside out, quite literally. And I just think I've never seen a movie be able to convey something like that. At least I don't think, to my recollection.
It's definitely been a while for sure. Where
Yeah.
I forget who described this in their review, but you typically only see kind of like the rise of someone from being sort of like a pleb into like someone who's really fully into their own with the hero's journey. And so seeing that kind of in a subversion with him, the villain's journey, if you will, I think is definitely like really interesting to see. I wouldn't say it's like the most unique thing that we've seen even from a Spider-Man movie, because in a way that's kind of what happened with Electro and Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Oh, yeah, but that wasn't done well.
I was about to say, like, that sucked, and this was really good.
Right.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think he's effective for what this movie needed to be. Although, I guess if I was to give any real issues with this movie, the likes of which actually doesn't put it over into the Spider-Verse for me personally, at least right now, is partially for the reason that Across the Spider-Verse is half of a film, pretty much, where there is a lot of resolution that comes with character arcs and the growth that they experience, such as Gwen and Miles' journeys in the story. But if we're looking at it from like a plot perspective, there are a lot of open threads that are there that I am hoping will be resolved effectively enough in the final film. Spot being one of them. Like, in the first, I want to say, like, hour of the movie, he's given a lot of time for us to understand his motivation as a villain and for us to really get the sense of who he is. After that point, he's pretty much dropped from the story. Like, we pretty much don't see him again after that point. And so while he has, like, an effective presence when he's there, he's not persistently through the whole thing. It's like it switches from him, and then it goes to, like, Miguel O'Hara being the sort of antagonist. Like, he has what he thinks are the best intentions, even though we as the audience may not agree. And then we want to potentially get into the reveals in the final 20-30 minutes too.
Oh yeah, 100%. And once again, I think what you're saying about Miguel, I think the way he goes about handling Miles, especially, I love the way they reveal it, because also I do want to say one thing. I know animated films aren't edited in a typical fashion, or at least people don't think of it that way, but this is one of the cases where I would argue this should get nominated for best film editing at the Oscars. Because like the cuts they were making in this movie, like especially that opening sequence when Gwen is like drumming, I was like, it's like metric editing at its finest. And I'm like, how, like, this is the argument that animated films should get nominated for editing. But even with that being said, I think the way Miguel goes about like revealing to Miles, like, because you see throughout, they keep showing that the spider that says 24 on it, and in the first movie you don't really know why, but he reveals to Miles that he's the anomaly. He wasn't originally supposed to be Spider-Man in that universe. Spider-Man was supposed to stop the super collider, and then Peter Parker still would have been alive, and he reveals it to him in like the roughest way, in the most like what vindictive way possible. We were saying, he's like, you were a mistake, you weren't supposed to happen, and it's like, geez.
It's a very like, violent reveal for sure.
Yeah, and he's like hands on his neck or wherever he has him, and it really does feel like, once again, it really is like Empire Strikes Back in a lot. I mean, that's the obvious movie to compare it to, but it really does feel like a sequel that really ups the stakes in every single way, and you're learning these characters on a deeper level, and they're learning darker truths about themselves and darker truths about others around them that really make it a compelling story. But yeah, I mean, that ending, man, cliffhanger galore. And I will say, I can understand why that could be an issue, because I felt that the first time I walked out of the movie. I'm like, well, the story doesn't really feel complete, because honestly, this movie could have gone on for another hour and I wouldn't have complained because I was loving it that much. I really was.
Extremely well paced. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's almost, it goes too fast in some of it, which I'm not complaining about, but it really does fly by in every single sense. But I do think that was is amazing. It is like I just love to like for Miles' character, like how big it is, because it's like he takes all that courage and brings that back to his mom. It's like, how you told me to stand up in a room and tell everybody that I was worth it. He's like, I said that, and then he reveals to her that he's Spider-Man. She doesn't even know what he's talking about, and that is when you realize. Who? Yeah, and I love the way they edit it too, because they show these spider people going to like different locations, and it seems like they're all in one space. It seems like they're all going to Miles' home in his universe, and then you realize that 24 was the other universe in which the Spider-Man should have occurred, but there's no Spider-Man, so you see how New York has kind of become almost like Gotham. Like there's fires raging, like there's all this stuff. And then you see Uncle Aaron once again, and then something's up. And then, of course, by the end of the movie, get introduced to Miles Morales as the Prowler, which is such an amazing cliffhanger. I mean, I got to give them credit there. Even though it does feel almost incomplete, because like Force Awakens, for example, right? I'm not saying that it's better than Across the Spider-Verse, but I do still think that movie was a great starting point for the new trilogy, which they did not follow up in suit at all. But that ending with Luke on the cliff and the lightsaber, that feels like a complete story. That feels like a complete narrative. And I don't really feel that about this story as well, which I think was kind of what you were saying, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a good example you bring up, though, where with The Force Awakens, where I ultimately don't think that was like a story that was followed through on properly, despite my love for The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you look at that in comparison to Across the Spider-Verse, and you're like, I think it all has to do with just how the movie is structured, because I feel like this will play a lot better, kind of like how Cosmonaut Marcus described it. Once we have the whole picture and we can kind of view this as like 1 4 or 5 hour mega movie, it'll probably flow a lot differently, because a lot of Across the Spider-Verse does feel like a first or second act. I didn't ever really feel like there was a moment in the movie that felt like the third act climax or rising action, despite how compelling like the last half hour is. It all just felt like it was continuously building and never reached like a peak that would then go into falling action. Going back to the principles of screenwriting, like we were talking about earlier, you have that structure of like, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. It never really reaches that resolution point. It kind of peaks as the climax is there. And I think that's kind of why it doesn't feel as satisfying now. And why people in the audience would be like, no, because they're they're left hanging off a cliff in the most cliffhanger way possible,
Sure.
I guess you could say.
No, I agree with that 100%. I also want to ask you how you felt about the treatment of Peter B. Parker in the story, because like even he gets great moments. Like, so it's not like they're completely destroying him or whatever. But I felt like he was like a little bit too like jokey, I guess. I don't know if that's like a fair criticism, but that was kind of something. He felt like more of a gag in some ways, even though they have those moments with him and his daughter, who's adorable. And it's because like the thing with him being a daddy, so excited. I don't know. I felt like they overplayed it a little bit, but
they did.
Yeah.
I didn't have much of an issue with it, but they did.
Sure, that was one of my small criticisms with it, if I had any. Even though Jake Johnson's still great, and also he comes in like at the end of the story, so you kind of feel his absence throughout the entire narrative, which I'm sure won't be a problem in the third one at all.
Not to saying that I was like checking my phone, for like, oh, I want to leave. I was just kind of checking my phone every now and then to see how much time had passed, just out of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And by the time Peter B. Parker shows up, I'm like, dang, more than half of the movie is over already.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this?
No, man, and he was such a great part of. I think he's like one of the best characters in the first movie, and why that movie works so well from a writing standpoint. So I was just maybe a little disappointed with his portrayal in this one, but I'm sure they'll improve upon it when he's actually swinging into action in the next one.
Well, I mean, we barely saw anything of Penny Parker, and then nothing of Spider Noir or Spider Ham until literally
Right.
the final shot of the movie. And so maybe they're kind of teasing that as well, that Peter B. Parker will have a larger role in it, just as Miles' spider friends from the first movie are probably going to play in the finale too.
And also, I think it's worth noting because I forgot to mention earlier, but the reason you don't see Jeff and in the other universe is because he has died, presumably in the line of duty, which is very interesting considering the whole canon event thing. Though I don't really know if that plays a factor into it. This is why it's so confusing because it's like, how is this going to play out? Because if he's already the anomaly and his universe has not been ruined, maybe it's okay, and maybe he isn't in danger in the way you think it is. And also, I love this scene with Gwen and his parents. As funny as them accusing, like when they find the sweater in the bedroom, it's like, or like what could he be doing? Well, I think this is a bit earlier. It's like, what could he be doing with her? And his mom says, "Oh, I have an idea,"
Like,
but just
you
how,
two boinking.
yeah. But it's like one of those things where when she comes back, even though there's kind of like jokes with it, like her saying to them, it's like Miles loves you more than you could possibly imagine. Like that also brings tears to my eyes every time watching. They're like, also tell him he's
Great line.
grounded for, yeah, and also tell him he's grounded for 5 months. They follow it up with the best type of humor in a way that adds levity and it doesn't distract from the actual meaning of the interaction, and that's why I'm like I don't entirely mind the way it ends, but you could consider it a criticism for sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely eager to see how it all comes together. I just find it kind of difficult to give it a finite score for now, just because you gave the example of the Force Awakens earlier, or we have the examples of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where
Yeah, yeah,
you can't really have you can't really watch any of the movies except for maybe Fellowship of the Ring and feel like you've watched the complete story. But at the same time, each one definitely has like three distinct acts that build to this massive conclusion that definitely lets you feel fulfilled. Even the Two Towers, for that matter.
oh yeah,
And yeah, I guess we'll just wait and see.
yeah, man. I don't know. I don't see this coming. I don't see this failing. I really don't. I already think this is in my top 10 favorite comic book movies of all time. I really think it's one of the best that's ever been made. The first one falls a little bit under that for me, but yeah, man, I don't really. I think this is, as of now, the best movie I've seen all year, and yeah, I love this movie. I mean, if I were to rate it, I don't know if you want me to give my rating on here, but
Go
I
ahead.
I give it a very high 9 out of 10. So I absolutely, it's not completely perfect, but there's a lot to love in every single frame, and I'm just glad that Phil Lord and Chris Miller and everybody involved in the production of this, they really care about these characters, and it isn't like Marvel, who are trying to set up this universe almost haphazardly at this point and injecting in humor that's really awkward and takes away from the actual drama. It really, this shows that they have a lot of love for these comics and a lot of integrity for these properties and characters, and I just don't think you see this level of dedication in any comic book movie, if I'm being quite honest.
And I think you've pretty much summed it up. Like, I'm not really sure there's much else I could say on top of that. Like, I think this definitely is a momentous achievement, what they've accomplished here. In animation alone, like, this is going to continue to encourage other studios to push the envelope in what they're creating. And other studios are probably going to learn the wrong lessons. I mean, we've seen the trailer for Disney's Wish that kind of feels like
I haven't seen
the
it.
cheap. Well, when you do, you'll get the sense that they're trying to go after like the Spider-Verse kind of style a little bit, but it definitely looks like a cheap cel-shaded filter when you look at it,
Okay.
just the way that the characters move. Well, anyway, that's an aside, but this definitely pushes the envelope for animation, but it also definitely shows, just like you were saying, that there's a lot of potential for superhero stories to continue to be better. It reminds me of, I don't know if it was Lord or Miller that said this, but he was saying that he doesn't believe in superhero fatigue. He believes that there's fatigue in seeing things that we've seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that mantra was the guiding force behind this movie. Continuing to, we've seen tons of superhero movies at this point, Spider-Man movies alone, but they're endeavoring to give us an experience that is genuinely unique while also still down to earth and is a real, sincere human story. And that's exactly what this movie provided. Like it's unique, it's fresh, even more so than the original in that sense. And it continues to be a story that never loses its heart and its side of its characters.
Never. And I do think that this is why it's one of the most definitive Spider-Man tales. I still think Spider-Man 2 is the best though. just in terms of iconography and just how much I love that movie. But this comes pretty damn close if you ask me.
It sure does. Do you have any other final closing comments?
No, I think I said everything I needed to say, at least I can think of now. This is actually better than my actual review. So I feel like I've definitely said a lot about this movie and really proved why I absolutely love this film. I just think it's brilliant and it's destined to be a classic, man.
I really think it is as well. Well, thanks again for joining. I really appreciated having you, Nathaniel, and I'd love to have you on for more reviews in the near future. And, you mentioned your own review. For anyone who's listening, we kind of already touched on it, but I will be including a link to Nathaniel's channel where you can look back on his own review of this specific movie, but also check out some of his series, like the top 100 countdowns for various types of albums throughout the decades, as well as his the best films of all time. And yeah, he's a great follow. He's got a lot of great insights to share about film and music. And so appreciated having you, man. Is there anyone else or anywhere else that people can find you at?
Yeah, you can find me in. Hey, man, the pleasure's all mine. I'm so glad that you invited me on here to have this great discussion. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Nathaniel_Ahart. So that's really where I kind of post stuff. And sometimes people like it, sometimes they don't. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, that's that. And YouTube is pretty much my forte. Though there might be some interesting stuff coming out soon. I'm thinking of releasing a track here that I want you all to hear at some point. But if find me on YouTube and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it'll be a great stepping stone. I mean, a lot of great artists have gotten their start on there, musicians or otherwise. So yeah, thanks again. And then for anyone listening, if you liked what you heard here and would like to see more of what I have to offer, whether it be reviews like this or my more scripted video essay type content, feel free to give us a like and then subscribe to the channel and then join the notification squadron, as I call it, to so you won't miss out on those videos. Otherwise, thank you all for being here, and I hope you all have a good one. Peace out.
Guys.